It's 9 a.m. in Surabaya and the staff at the Central Pentecostal Church are holding their daily musical prayer session. But this is not like other days. The memory of what happened here is still raw. Normally they sing inside the church, but police tape still blocks the way.
It was the church's first service of the day.
YONATHAN WAHONO is the senior pastor here.
I was making announcements right before the closing prayer around 7:55. There was a huge explosion.
We now know that explosion was a car bomb at the front of the church.
Suddenly from the front gate at Arjuno Street, there was a big fire and black and thick smoke. We couldn't see anything. Some of the congregation were injured by glass shards. Some had burns.
7 church members were killed, 2 remain in hospital.
I continue to pray for them so that God helps them recover from the effects of the explosion.
Indonesia is no stranger to terrorism, but this attack and a string of others like it involved almost unimaginable cruelty. Suicide bombers taking their own wives and children to their deaths.
It may be the consequence of ISIS having regularly encouraged the training of young children as militants, even though it's a question of whether they actually approved the use of children in suicide bombings or not.
Sydney Jones, one of Indonesia's foremost experts on terrorism, says the use of children is beyond the pale, even for some members of the Islamic State group.
It's interesting that there's a debate now going on within extremist circles on Telegram, the media application, where some of the extremists themselves are questioning whether it was appropriate to use children.
The man who bombed the Pentecostal church was Dieter Obriato, an essential oil salesman from an unremarkable suburb in outer Surabaya. Minutes before his unholy deed, his 8 and 12-year-old daughters, dutifully strapped with bomb belts, were led by their mother into the Christian church of Diponegoro and detonated. Meanwhile, their 2 teenage sons rode across town on motorbikes to attack the Santa Maria church. They'd all been hiding in plain sight. Initial reports they'd travelled to Syria were incorrect. They learned everything at home. This is the community mosque, or mushola, where Dieter Obriato came almost every day to kneel before God. He gave no hint of the rage within.
The only difference is that I wear a sarong every time I go to pray, while he wore trousers.
Some people would assume that this mosque is a radical mosque. What do you say to those people?
If there is anyone who thinks that this mosque is radical, let's say a terrorist nest, please prove it. This mosque is open. We have nothing to hide.
The church attacks weren't the only atrocities that day. After dark, members of another family, including children, were killed when a bomb their father was putting together unintentionally blew up in his face. Several of their other children were orphaned. Then, the next morning, this attack by a third family on the city's police headquarters. Their little girl was the only survivor. SETO MULYADI is a household name in Indonesia. A children's television superstar, he was brought to Surabaya to meet the bombers' orphaned children in hospital.
It seems there was this indoctrination that to play is to sin.
These days, his focus is traumatised children. His task now to show the children of the Surabaya bombers everything they've ever known is abhorrent.
The development of every child depends on their environment. If that environment has been so radical as this, and we don't take it seriously, and try to lead them back to a normal life, they may continue on with what their parents taught them.
At Surabaya's Grand Mosque, the Imam condemns the attacks on his city and calls for all of Indonesia's Muslims to be united. But he also points to what he sees as another brand of terrorism.
Seperti Israel memperlakukan Palestina, itu teroris. Amerika yang melakukan penyerbuan ke Timur Tengah, itu adalah terorisme.
Much has been made of the fact around 500 Indonesians who travelled to Syria to join the caliphate set up by Islamic State have now returned home. But there may be one thing more dangerous than foreign fighters, those stopped at the Syrian border and deported before they could enter the fray.
These are people who never directly experienced the hardship, the discrimination, the hypocrisy, or the corruption within ISIS. So there's no reason for them to be disillusioned. If anything, they're even more committed to the ideology having come back than they were before they left.
So should Australians planning a trip to Bali be worried?
I don't think they should go during Ramadan. I think after Ramadan, things will be clearer and the dangers of militant action will have decreased. For the moment, I would say better to stay home for now.
For the people of Surabaya, life just continues. Once the media caravan has moved on, well, they're still here, aren't they? Of course, they're shocked and saddened by what happened in their city, but they also know that the vast majority of their fellow citizens wants the same as human beings everywhere: to live their lives, love their families, and get on with their neighbours. Back at the Pentecostal church, the police tape has finally been lifted and the clean-up is getting underway. When it reopens, it will be with additional security and many more prayers.
Tapi kami tetap
We told our congregation to forgive the perpetrators with the love of Jesus, so perhaps nothing like this will happen again.